So we are going to start. My name is Paula Adams. I am with the Hawaii Afterschool Alliance, and I would like to say hi to all of you. Happy Friday, and welcome to our community meeting, out of school time community meeting. And I'm going to pass the mic to Jen, who is going to give us some announcements and introduce our facilitator of today.
Thanks, Paula. Hi, everyone. This is Jen Masutani with the Hawaii After School Alliance. We're very excited to have you here today to talk about the Na Hopena A'o, or the HA framework. We're going to talk about ways that you can ground your programming with youth to Hawaii, whether it's through daily practices or on a more organization-wide level. But before that, we have just a couple of announcements. First, we have our training, Engaging Youth Through Drama, on November 9th, so next Monday from 3 to 5. We're doing it with the Honolulu Theater for Youth, and it's going to be a fun, engaging training on how to build students' self-confidence and pique their interest in learning through different drama activities. And I will say we had this training on Tuesday on election day, and for 2 whole hours during the training, I did not think about the elections once. So I think that's a good indication of how fun the training will be. So I hope that entices you to join us next Monday. And I believe Lexi's putting the link to that in the chat box. For next week's OST community meeting, we are going to start talking about summer 2021. We have Chris Murray from Bell Excel joining us, and this past summer, Bell Excel partnered with Kama'aina Kids, the YMCA of Honolulu, and PACT to provide a remote summer learning program. So she'll talk about some of the lessons learned from this past summer and how to start thinking and planning for next summer. I think we're all kind of aware and really concerned about COVID learning loss. And in addition to that, with summer, there comes the challenge of summer learning loss. So we really are trying to focus on making summer 2021 as an opportunity to start addressing that and helping kids to catch up to whatever learning they might have lost during the school year. So we hope you'll join us for that, and the link to register is also in the chat. And then lastly, Youth Service America has an after-school grant program out, so you can apply for $500 to lead service learning activities with youth. And we've talked about in a couple of our previous webinars about the importance of service learning and how it's a great way to engage youth around like social and emotional well-being, because service learning helps kids not only to practice their leadership skills, but it helps them to feel like they have purpose and a meaning, that their work that they're doing is impactful. It also helps them to feel connected to their community, especially during a time when we feel very disconnected and isolated. So we hope that you would take advantage of this grant opportunity. And then with that, I'm excited to introduce our speaker for today. We have Kaʻanohiokalā Kalama-Macomber, who's the director of the Office of Hawaiian Education at the Hawaii Department of Education. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kaʻanohi.
Mahalo, Jen. Mahalo, ladies, for having me this morning. And mahalo to all of you who are on the call for joining us today for this presentation. A little bit about Na Hopena A'o, and mostly about how we truly ground our practice to this beautiful place that we get to call home. So I'm going to ask, it looks like we have about 47 on. And so, Jen, you can go ahead and do maybe 9 rooms, and that should be okay for our time. We're going to start off, as Jen mentioned, my name is Kaʻanohi. I'm with the Office of Hawaiian Education, and I am the education specialist for Na Hopena A'o for the entire state of Hawaii. And really my goals and my hopes are to just help educators, help communities, help families see how Hawaii has so much to offer. Hawaii has so much to offer in the learning and teaching process. And if we just listen to Hawaii, and if we feel Hawaii, and if we pull from Hawaii, then we can explore so many wonderful things, and the sky's the limit, and we will thrive. And so to open our space today, I am going to ask you folks to participate in an Aloha circle. I've just dropped in the chat what you're going to be sharing in the Aloha circle. If we were in person, we'd be standing in a large circle, and if COVID wasn't around, we'd be holding hands and really close with one another, sharing of one another's energies. Unfortunately, we have to do it in this digital space, but that doesn't mean that we cannot still create a safe, trusting, loving space that's really full of aloha for one another. And so Jen's going to send everyone into smaller breakout rooms, and you're going to share, you're going to uplift these 3 inoa within your group. No explanation necessary, just uplift the names. The 3 names that we're asking you to call forward today is your name, all of your names, any of your names, whichever one you're really channeling today. The second name is going to be the name of your aina. This could be a place where you lay your head last night. This could be where you're from, but you no longer live. Or this could even be just aina that really resonates with you, that really means something to you. And then the third inoa that you're going to share is the inoa of someone you honor in the work that you do, right? Who is someone that you bring with you to work, metaphorically, right? Not necessarily carry them with you into your space, but who is someone that you channel in the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, this could be a kupuna, it could be someone who has passed on, someone who is living, it could be a child, it could be a mentor, whoever it is that you really channel in the work that you do and you honor through the work that you do. Okay, so just to recap, when you go into your spaces, you're going to have 5 minutes in your group to uplift these 3 names: your inoa, the inoa of your aina, and the inoa of someone that you honor in the work that you do. Okay, does anybody have any questions about what you're about to do? No? All right, Jen, go ahead and you can send them into rooms. You can leave me in the main room. Mahalo. Okay, it looks like we have everyone back from your breakout rooms. Hopefully everyone was able to share. Is there anyone that was not able to share who was in a breakout room? No? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and uplift my inoa for you folks, and then we have a couple others who are gonna share with you as well. So again, I'm Kaʻanohiokalā Kalama-Macomber. My aina is Kailua and Waimanalo Oahu, and the person that I honor in the work that I do is my tutukane, Charles Kaʻanapu Kalama. I'd like to invite Lexi to uplift her 3 names.
Yes, I'm Lexi Huang, and I was born and raised in Westminster, Colorado, and then the last one is my grandpa, Peyton Stone.
Mahalo, Lexi. Mahalo, Walton. I see your note in the chat. Walton's name is Walton. His aina is Eva Beach, and the person coming to the space is your grandmother. Mahalo. I'm gonna go ahead and ask Julian.
Aloha, my name is Julian Kahele. I am on the Wailuku Maui, but I'm from Oahu. Someone that I honor in the work that I do is my keiki. I do what I do for my keiki.
Mahalo. And I'd like to invite Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Masutani. I am from Kaʻanohiokalā, and I honor Joyce, who's one of the youth that I worked with when I worked in a summer youth program.
Mahalo. And mahalo to Jen and Lexi for sharing. Oftentimes the people who are behind the scenes don't get to be a part of these circles and don't get to be a part of the sharing, but their moʻolelo are just as important as all of ours. So mahalo for uplifting your inoa. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you folks. So if you just give me one moment. Okay, everybody should be able to see this. Really what everyone did in that aloha circle is you uplifted your own personal moʻolelo, right? With na Hopena, and with this need to connect back to Hawaiʻi and to really ground ourselves in Hawaiian ways of knowing, it's the acknowledgement that moʻolelo are important. Stories are really what allows Hawaiʻi to continue to thrive. It's the passing on of stories. It's the creation of new ones. It's the stringing together of multiple moʻolelo that make a beautiful lay to tell the moʻolelo of our lives, right? Moʻolelo is this idea of a succession of experiences, of histories, of genealogies, of myths, of the spoken word that we uplift into our environment, and the passing on of knowledge from one generation to the next, right? And so Nahopena'o is telling us that each and every one of your personal mo'olelo are important. And when we uplift our own individual name, what we're doing is we're uplifting the identity that our kupuna had hoped for us. We're uplifting who we are as an individual into this space. We're sharing with everyone the intentionality behind our naming, right? Without any explanation. In speaking these names into our spaces, we're giving them life, we're breathing life into them, right? There's a saying, "Ika olelo no keola," right? In speaking, we can breathe life into things. And so we need to continue to uplift the names and the intentions behind them. The second name that you brought forth, the Inoa of your Aina, tells the mo'olelo of the lands that have nurtured you in one way, shape, or form without having to say the whole story. By you uplifting the name, you're telling us it's someplace that's important to you. We get to get a glimpse into a little bit more of your personal story and maybe why you act the way you do. I can tell the difference between a child that comes from Kalihi and a child that comes from Wai'anae just by their mannerisms and by the way that they stand, right? And there's nothing positive or negative about that. It's who they are. It's how they represent themselves. It's how they were nurtured and cared for the place that they call home. And the third Inoa that you uplifted, the person that you honor in the work that you do, is really helping to tell the story of why you are the way that you are, why you choose to do the things that you choose to do, and the hope that everyone is able to see these people through your actions and through the way that you show up in every space that you show up to, right? It's honoring the fact that none of us come to any of this work all by ourselves. Even if we may have had a hard life and even if we may have felt like we were all alone, the reality of it is there was always someone in our life who made some sort of impact on us that helps us to decide what our future might look like and what we might want to do, right? And so we continue to uplift those names. And by sharing these three names, you're sharing, like I said, a little piece of your personal mo'olelo with the group. And you're saying, hey, these are names that are important to me. And I'd love to share them with all of you. And I hope that through the work that I do and through the way that I interact with you, you see them through me. Right? And in doing that, in uplifting mo'olelo, what we're doing is we're really strengthening pilina. One of the asks of the After School Alliance was we want to get to know more about how to incorporate Hawaiʻi into our practice. At the very bare minimum, if you uplift mo'olelo of your place, and you focus on strengthening pilina, connections to one another and connections to place, you are doing Hawaiʻi. No matter what culture you're focusing on, no matter what language you're focusing on, when we ground to the stories of our place, the stories that really nurture us here in our home, and when we focus on making sure that all relationships that we build are strengthened and continue to be strengthened, we are doing Hawaiʻi. We're doing what the ancestors of this place have done for generations in order to be able to provide us with this beautiful home that we cherish, right? I'd like to invite you folks to do a quick activity. You see at the bottom, there's a link. It's www.mentimeter.com. Oh, sorry, www.menti.com. So if you can go ahead and type that into your browser, and it's going to ask you to put in a code. The code is there on your screen, 188921-5, and I will put it in the chat as well in case you need to navigate away from this screen. And so I'm asking you folks to go to this polling and really type in just a single word or like a really short 3-word phrase or whatever it is that finishes this statement. When I walk into whatever your community is, I know that I'm in that community and not somewhere else in the world because of what? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? How do you know you're in Hawaii and nowhere else in the world? What are the unique attributes of this place that really stand out to you? Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and switch screens so we can see that Mentimeter develop. So I know everybody should be in www.menti.com. I know I'm in Hawaii and nowhere else in the world because what? You can see it taking place, and we all know how word clouds work, right? The more a word shows up, the bigger it gets. One of the things I like to point out is that that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the most important, because one of the things that Nahopena'o tells us is the importance of paying attention to multiple stories and multiple ways of looking at things and saying things and expressing ourselves. And so while aloha might be the word that one person chooses, love might be the word that another one chooses, essentially they mean the same thing, they're just different ways of expressing it, right? And so I invite you folks to take a look at the words around the word aloha that's showing up really strong from this group. And be mindful of all of the attributes that you folks are bringing into this place. So I invite you folks to continue to populate. I think each person can put up to 3 words into this word cloud. At the end of the presentation, I'll be capturing this, putting it in the slide deck, and you folks will be able to have a copy of this to be reminded of the attributes that you folks uplifted as a collective, right? But if we call some of it out, the uniqueness of Hawaii is the sense of aloha, the diversity, the beauty, language, multicultural, this feeling of malama aina. I'm not sure if that's meant to say paradise, kindness, people, pigeon. If we think about pigeon and the history of pigeon, people think, oh, it's just because they don't know how to talk English properly. No, it comes from the multicultural nature of Hawaii, of this place, right? Of the coming together of Filipino cultures, of Japanese cultures, of Hawaiian cultures, of English cultures, and trying to find a common language that everyone can understand, right? It's this feeling of community there. It's not just that that people are uneducated. It's how we create a dialect that everyone can understand, that everyone can tether to, right? And so if we think if we think of the moʻolelo behind all of these things and why they show up the way that they do, that's what's really important. And how are we perpetuating those moʻolelo? How are we continuing to ground our practice to all of these unique attributes that you folks uplifted? One of the things that Nahopena'o really asks us to take a look at is, are we really focusing in on those essential skills and those essential conditions that really allow a'o to thrive, that really allow learning and teaching and experiencing to thrive in all of our spaces? And you folks as an alliance have, like I said, you folks have identified that you want to know more about how to ground to this place of Hawaii, how to ground your content to this place. What are the resources out there? And I ask you to start with moʻolelo and pilina, and then also to take a look back at those attributes that you're uplifting. If these are the things that you're putting into the word cloud, you're saying it's important to you. You're saying that this has made an impact on you. And so how then are we purposefully designing all of that into our work and into our practice, into our programs, into the things that we turn around and deliver back to the community, to the students, to the teachers? How do we make sure aloha is embedded in everything that we do? How do we make sure that there's this feeling of community in all of our programs and activities, right? Nahopena'o tells us, take what we know works for Hawaii and design that back into our programs, design that back into our lessons and our activities. Nahopena'o came to the system formally back in 2010 when the DOE system was really being reflective of the fact that, you know, there were conditions in place that really made for less than ideal learning environments for Hawaii's children. What they're noticing was there's just a focus of success on the individual. There wasn't a feeling of the collective. Schools were turning inwards. Community was not a part of school decision making, not in the way that they should have been. The teachers were bogged down with needing to be experts in everything and getting burnout. Everything was standards and prescriptive based, and not a lot of room for flexibility and innovation. And so they thought, the task force thought long and hard. They solicited feedback from the communities, from schools, from educators, from families. What's missing in our education system? What might we do to better support Hawaii's DOE and beyond, right? And the whole state of Hawaii. And what they found was that what was missing was Hawaii itself. And so when it came time to develop a framework, develop some guidances, they realized that we cannot put out just another set of standards. We cannot just replace the GLOs or anything like that. What we really need to do is create a framework that allows schools to tether to the same foundations, the foundations that are built off of this place, this unique place that we get to call home, right? Kau'i Keauli said, "He aupuni palapala ko'u. Mine is a nation of education." And when he said that, yes, we were boasting literacy rates of above 90% in Hawaii, but that's not why he mentioned that. It wasn't because everyone in Hawaii had a degree. It wasn't because everyone in Hawaii had went to school every single day. It wasn't because of all of that. What he really meant was that the people of Hawaii are already educated, and they're educated because of this place. They're educated because they understand their connection as a part to a greater whole, right? Everyone has a kuleana to uphold, and everyone embraces that responsibility and does it to the best of their ability and continues to hone in on their gifts and their strengths, because they know that that's what's necessary for the lahui, for the collective to truly thrive, right? And that is education. Being able to figure out, where do I fit in the grand scheme of all of it, and how do I chisel in at my gifts and my strengths and continue to fine tune them so I can be the best me for everyone else around me and everything else around me. And so they found that, like I said, what was missing from the education system and from the state as a whole was this sense of Hawaii and this reminder that we live here in this unique place, right? And Kaz Faria is from Mokokiawe in the short Ha video that you can visit on your own on our Nahopana'o website. He closes out the video by saying 30, 40, 50 years from now, I want to be able to come back to a Hawaii that I recognize. I still want to have Hawaii to come back to. If I go away, I want to make sure when I come home, I'm coming home and I recognize my home, right? And so what are we doing to prepare the future generations to continue to uplift, nurture, and cherish this home while they're here, so that that statement can be true? So if they go away after high school and they want to go travel the world, when they come back, they still have Hawaii to look forward to. Nahopana'o literally means the end goals of learning. It's the results of maintaining a symbiotic relationship between learning and teaching, and recognizing that each and every one of us are teachers and learners in every single experience. And so how do we uplift that, and how do we create the conditions in these learning environments where everyone can see that in themselves and can truly thrive, right? Where we really focus in on the strength and sense of belonging, responsibility, excellence, aloha, total well-being, and Hawaii. And the driving question for all of us as we design is, how are we transforming as a system beyond just the DOE system, as a system of Hawaii, in order to provide more flexibility, equity, and choice in designing learning environments where all learners can succeed. And this statement of learning environments is a recognition that every single experience we have at every moment of every day is a learning environment. It's an opportunity for a'o to take place. When your keiki wake up in the morning and they go brush their teeth, that is an opportunity for a'o to be taking place. Yeah. When we're driving in the car and they're looking out the window, those are opportunities. Learning and learning environments don't only exist in the four-wall formal classrooms that people tend to default to, right? We need to accept that learning is happening everywhere around us. And so how are we as a state shifting all of our practices to uplift opportunities for learning through this place? Because everyone has something to tether to. Nahopana'o tells us that if we don't uplift Hawaii, the students will not have any way to create pilina to whatever content it is that you're giving them. It's not going to be meaningful for them. They may do it in that moment, but they're not going to take it home with them. They're not going to continue to think about it because they don't see it in their everyday life. So how do we get them to see through the lens of their lives and of what they're experiencing outside of all of the formal spaces that they visit? Belonging tells us that this is a relationship that cannot be undone, really saying that I know who I am in relationship to everyone around me and all of the places around me, and I know how I fit in the grand scheme of things, right? I also know that no matter what, I always have a seat at the table. So when you folks are planning your programming and you're planning activities and you're planning just the collaboration between schools, how are you making sure to build in conditions where everyone feels a sense of belonging to the work, everyone feels a sense of belonging to the ohana, right? This is a photo. I know we had some Eva Makai signed up, and so I got to visit the school, and this is a photo that I took of one of your murals, and it says, you see right there, Eva Makai accepts you, show your true colors, right? And so how are we creating opportunities and activities where every individual sees themselves as a part of the moʻolelo and feels nurtured in that space, enough so that they're able to show their true selves and be their true selves, and really komoi kahana, really get into whatever it is that we're doing, and then start to develop a sense of responsibility, where we say in working one learns, through initiative one acquires, but really it's the focus that responsibility is our privilege, right? We are honored to be able to carry these responsibilities that we're given, whether it's the responsibility to be respectful to one another, whether it's the responsibility to help clean up the balls when we're finished playing our game, whether it's the responsibility to participate in whatever activity it is that we're doing. That sense of kuleana for Hawaiʻi is seen as a privilege. It's never seen as a chore, right? And that is another reason why Hawaiʻi was able to thrive for so long, because everyone understood their kuleana in relationship to the whole, and understood that I need to do my very best. And when I understand why it's important and I feel a belonging to the work, then I will take the initiative to do so. Right? So how are we creating opportunities like this one in the picture, where the responsibilities are truly seen as a privilege and an honor, because we're able to be connected and really tuned in to the work, and know that we have a small place in affecting what's best for the greater collective. And so in your folks' planning of the work that you do, how are you creating opportunities for that? When students have a sense of belonging, when we all have a sense of belonging to the work, and we feel safety in being ourselves, only then can we truly begin to look at what we have to offer, right? Excellence, the sense of excellence for Ha is telling us that it should no longer be one definition of success, one size fits all, that every single individual has his or her own gifts that they bring to the system, that every individual has his or her own strengths that they can offer to the work, right? And it's our kuleana as educators, it's our kuleana as designers of experiences, of whatever you want to call yourselves, to really get to know those moʻolelo, to spend the time, like Auntie Puanani Burgess tells us, to get to know the story of your students' names and why they act the way that they do, why they show up the way that they do. Get to know the story of one another's places, and get to know the story of one another's gifts. At the true core of it all, where does the passion lie? And then allow everyone to look at every experience through the lens of their gift, right? This picture of a hale and nanakuli is a perfect example of an activity where every student will succeed in their own way. Every gift is welcome here. If you don't want to climb the oloke'a, you don't want to climb the scaffold because you're afraid of heights, that's okay. You can sit down and you can be the person responsible for cutting the kaula, the cordage, right? And that's not busy work at all. Because if you are meticulous, if your gift lies in paying really good attention to detail, then that's the perfect job for you. Because if you know anything about building hale, if your cordage isn't the right length, then it's gonna be poho, it's gonna be waste, right? And so you wanna make sure you have the right people on the job to give you what you need. Because when you're hanging up on that scaffold, you cannot be fussing with the wrong size cord, right? And so everyone has a place in this hana. And how do we create activities where everyone sees that? And it's not just standing on the side waiting for the invitation to come, but from the introduction to the activity, we already can begin to see where our gifts can fit and where we can offer something of value to the greater whole, to the collective group. Aloha tells us to have the heart of a chief. It says, I do things with love and appreciation so that good results may fall upon me, my family, my community, my land, and the world. Aloha, Auntie Pilahipaki tells us, is this sense of akahai, having kindness in everything that we're doing. Lokahi, focusing on this sense of unity, that we're not alone in any of this, that it's a kako thing. Olu olu, to be agreeable and pleasant, to be welcoming, to lend a listening ear and not always have to be the one talking and taking. Ha'a ha'a, telling us to be humble, saying that we should all celebrate our successes and be proud of that, be ha'aheo. But with that comes this recognition that we didn't get here alone. And there's always more to learn, right? And then Ahonui tells us that with patience comes perseverance, that we recognize things are going to be hard, times are going to be rough, and shifts are always difficult. But when we do it together, we will come out successful in the end, right? And so this is a photo of a group of Opio from Castle High School, the Ho'olu Opio group, who presented at the 2019 Ha Summit in Waimea. And you know, they were really afraid. They didn't think that they had anything to offer this group of educators, right? There's 300 plus educators in the room, and they didn't think that they had anything to offer. But really what they needed to be reminded of is that everybody has something to offer, and all they need to do is share with Aloha and share from their heart, and it will be meaningful for them as well as everybody receiving it, right? And so how do we create conditions where everyone's encouraged to show up in this way? And Aloha is uplifted as the rule, right? In our practice, it's Aloha above all else, no matter what. And how do we increase recognition that as long as we're giving Aloha, it will be reciprocated, right? Because it is the rule of how we do what we do. Total well-being asks us to pay attention to more than just the physical, but the mental and the spiritual relationships, and really nurturing those relationships in positive ways. And so how are we creating conditions where even if we're in a concrete jungle, things can still thrive, right? This is a school where there isn't, these mala are built in concrete, but look how wonderful they're doing, right? What are the conditions that they're putting into it? What is the aloha and the spirituality that the students are putting into it to allow this mea kanu to feel loved enough to want to grow and provide? Yeah. How are we recognizing the multiple gifts of this place, utilizing the wisdom of our kupuna and the moʻolelo of our communities to remind us that Hawaii has everything that we need. If we just listen, if we just feel it, if we just engage in it, right? Then it will rejuvenate us mentally, physically, spiritually, and beyond. And then how do we create self-checks in our system where everyone sees that it's important to take a moment to stop and think about the decision I'm about to make and think, would my kupuna have acted this way no matter what ethnicity you come from? We all have a generation that came before us, right? So would my kupuna have acted in this way? Probably not. So why am I doing it? If I act in this way right now, is it gonna give me a good day? Probably not. So why am I doing it? And if I continue to act in this way, am I gonna leave behind the best possible legacy, the best memory of myself for other people? Probably not. So why am I doing it, right? And so how do we build that into the regular way we do things, right? And in your programs, you folks have the opportunity to be an extension of the learning that's taking place in school, an extension of the learning that's taking place at the homes and in the greater communities. And so how are we continuing to equip the students with tools for this sort of social and emotional growth, right? How are we communicating with the schools, with the families, and with the communities so we can be in alignment with these practices? If you develop something that you see working really, really well to help your students with coping mechanisms and all of those kinds of things, how are you translating that to the schools that they're coming to you from so that there can be continuity for students, right? One of the biggest things that create stress for children is a lack of continuity, right? They don't know what to expect. They don't know. And mom saying one thing, dad saying the other thing, I'm going to go down the middle, right? Same thing for schools, your programs, communities, and families, right? What might you do to create conditions that invite all of those stakeholders into the process with you so you can provide the best possible experiences for your students, as well as your staff and your greater community. Last but not least, Hawaii tells us that Hawaii is our prize place, right? We acknowledged that in the beginning, that we're so very lucky to be able to have Hawaii to live in. With that said, though, if we don't continue to nurture it and to uplift it, we're going to forget about it. Right? And so how are we showing our love and appreciation for this place? By continuing to uplift the moʻolelo of this place, by continuing to look through the lens of Hawaii. I saw that Pomahina was going to be on this call. I'm not sure if you're here, but this is just a screenshot of one of their web pages. And I put this here because all of these designs are designed through moʻolelo of Hawaii. But there's technology in this, there's STEM in this. Every aspect of core content area is depicted in these designs. The difference is it's relevant. It's being made relevant to this place that we live in, right? And so how are we uplifting the stories of this place to design experiences that we create for one another? Right? And create relevant learning opportunities that become truly meaningful experiences for our students and for ourselves. That's not to say that we shouldn't be teaching them things that are not of Hawaii, but that they first need to be grounded in this place and what is of Hawaii in order to be able to appreciate what's from outside. Yeah. I have a quick activity, but before I do, one of the biggest messages of this is how do we remind ourselves that Hawaii is our mainland, because we're living here. And while we're living here, no matter where we came from, no matter what our background is, no matter what our belief system is, we all have a kuleana to this place. Yeah, how do we uplift that in our practices and send those messages in the ways that we plan and design? And so I have this quick nane for you folks, and you folks can, I'm gonna minimize my screen because I won't be able to see the chat. You folks can drop it in the chat if you think you know the answer. And the nane, the riddle is ku'upuna vai kau I ka leva, hea havau. Yeah, my freshwater spring hung up in the air, what am I? Mai ka'i keahi. I'm pretty sure you've seen this before. The answer is he knew. Yeah, it's a coconut. But this is just really a fun way to get them to start to think. Hawaiians have so many different activities out there and so many different practices, daily practices. Vines, polole, new. So many different practices that really got us to think critically, right? And for those of us who are in education, especially if you're in Hawaiian medium education, you're familiar with this, but the riddles get harder and harder. And you know, that's one of the best things that I love doing with my children is getting them to tell me new nane that they learn in school and having me really think about, do I know what they're talking about? Right? And be reminded that, oh, there's some new things that I learn every single day. And it's this critical thinking process. But what this does is it introduces us to new, right? Okay, well, now let's go and let's explore. What does it mean that there's a freshwater spring in there? What are the components of new, right? And then that's an introduction to an activity that's making it relevant, that's making it meaningful, that's bringing them into wanting to know more about it because they see coconuts all around their world, right? And here's one more. E kolu pa aloha akawai, hea havau. 3 walls and you reach the water. What am I? Go ahead and type it in the chat if you think you know. Okay, this one's a little bit more tricky, but he knew it's a coconut, right? If we think about a coconut has its 3 walls before you get to the actual water in the middle of it, in the center of it. But again, how are we encouraging them to engage in their environment and really think critically about these things and allow learning to happen naturally on its own? Yeah, so that's an example of something that you could incorporate. Have a daily nane that you do with them and invite them to create their own riddles based off of what they're seeing around them, and make it fun, right? And it's still grounding to Hawaii. It's still uplifting the stories of this place and the practices of this place, but in a way that's relevant to children. Really, in the Hawaii After School Alliance, one of the priority areas, right, is a sense of Hawaii. And so the statements in there is that Hawaiian everyday conversational words are being uplifted, that you're uplifting the multicultural nature of this island home, and that we're treating Hawaii with pride and respect, right? And so where Nahopana'o is in alignment with that is really the recognition that o Hawaii ke kahua o ka ho'ona'auau, right? Hawaii is the foundation of our enlightenment. Hawaii, like we said earlier, is the place that we can pull from. And not just Hawaiian things, right? But all things that are representative of this place. The histories of immigration, waves of immigration that have come to this place. The multicultural communities of this place. But when we're looking at those multiple cultures, look at them through the lens of Hawaii, right? Don't learn about the Hawaii Filipino community by learning about the Philippines. Learn about the Hawaii Filipino community through those people, through the Hawaii Filipino community, because it's different, right? They experience different things. They have different practices. They shifted a little bit, right? So how are we looking at all of this through the lens of this place? And like I said earlier, how are we ensuring that the notion everyone gets is that Hawaii is our mainland? When we ground to Hawaii ways of knowing, everyone in Hawaii can thrive because it's relevant, because they have moʻolelo, they have stories to tether to, because they're creating relationships that'll affect them for their entire lives, right? Some of the resources, I'll go ahead and present again, sorry. Some of the resources that we have available to you folks, and this is free for anybody to tap into, are located on our OHE Hub. And one of the biggest ones that really focus in on content is Aina Aloha. As it stands, Nahopana'o really asks you to think about the context, right? The conditions you design in your learning environments in order to invite people into the work. Aina Aloha is helping you to take a look at the content. When you're choosing content to share, does it truly ground to Hawaii? And it really focuses on 3 principles. It's Olelo Hawaii, Hawaiian language, Kuanaʻike Hawaii, a Hawaiian perspective, and Honua, a world perspective, right? And so this image is just an example of one of the cycles of growth that's represented and some prompts that it gets you to consider as you plan the experiences that you plan, right? When you're putting things in about wahipana, about sacred places in Hawaii, when you're connecting your participants to space and place, do they understand the significance and the importance of moʻolelo, of storytelling? Have you introduced moʻolelo to them? And are you utilizing it in all of your practices, right? Do they identify and explain the importance of names? You folks uplifted your 3 names. Is that a part of our practice? And are we uplifting the traditional names of these places? Even just the school grounds that you may be located on, or the aina that you may be located on. And do the students recognize the importance of continuing to perpetuate those names and the meanings of those names, and how exploration into the meaning of those names could really start getting them into science and inquiry and understanding of earth systems and all of those kinds of things, right? Because Hawaiian names tell stories, right? There's always a meaning behind it, and so on and so forth. And so at the end of this slide deck is a link to Aina Aloha, to the document itself, and you folks are more than welcome to utilize it. And if you'd like support in really beginning to implement it in your program and tethering to it in your program, the Office of Hawaiian Education can provide that support for you. But this is a tool that the DOE is using, and that's being piloted throughout multiple schools across the state in order to help ground school content to Hawaii. And so it would be great if programs such as yourselves could show the alignment, so we can get schools to want to engage more with your programs and invite you into the classroom, invite their students into your spaces, and see the gift that you folks have to offer in helping them to ground to these 3 core principles. Another resource that we offer, like I mentioned, is the OHE Hub. And OHE's main goal, like I said, is to ground in Hawaiian ways of knowing so that all of Hawaii may thrive, right? And so providing resources and tools to be able to support that across the entire state, beyond just the four-wall classroom. Our three main initiatives are Hawaiian Studies Program, Kaiapuni Programming, and Uplifting Inoa in all spaces in Hawaii. And so what you'll find on the OHE Hub are curriculum and assessment resources that aren't just for schools, right? You'll also find resources to other partnering organizations such as yourselves, some of the people on this call, who are developing curriculum, developing out of school activities that you folks can begin to utilize, and they're really grounded to Hawaii. If it's on our site, it's our way of saying that these are groups that are truly teaching and designing through Hawaiian ways of knowing. And so by all means, please go check them out. And if you feel like you're one of those places and you don't see yourself on our site, please don't take offense. We put it on as they come. So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to uplift your mo'olelo and be able to share your practices with the greater community. And this last resource is Olelo Hawaii resources. I know that especially for those who are not from Hawaii, wanting to ground to the language is something that's really important, and wanting to be respectful of the fact that Hawaii has two languages and we need to uplift Olelo Hawaii as much as possible. So we have put together a list of online resources, and that's also found on our hub on the Kapapahana Kaiapuni page. But what this also does is it'll connect you to the Na'ana'a'o, which is Hawaiian language and Hawaiian medium education standards rubrics. And that's something that you folks can take a look at. You're more than welcome to take a look at and see, you know, am I creating experiences that really support this? So those students who might be coming to me from Kaiapuni schools see that continuity from their school, from their home to my program, right? And there are curriculum supports on there, as well as free online dictionaries and offerings of Olelo Hawaii classes that you folks can all be a part of. And so as I wrap this up, one of the things that I ask you folks to really think about is with regards to Nahopana'o and this thought of designing conditions where everyone can thrive, what mo'olelo might be surfacing for you. Like I said in the beginning, Nahopana'o already exists in all of your spaces. It's nothing new. It's been in Hawaii since the beginning of time for Hawaii, right? We're just calling it something. We're naming it. We're giving it a name so that everyone has common language. And we're helping to give some guiding pillars so that everyone can tether to them. But where are you seeing Ha taking place in your life, right? And how are you uplifting that? How are you perpetuating that? How are you supporting that? What connections might you be making between Nahopana'o and your work? What are some things that you folks are already doing well that you want to continue to uplift? And then where are some areas for strengthening? One of the things that I shared with Jen and your planning team is it something as simple as, how do you greet your students every single day? What's the protocols you folks have in place before they come and experience anything that they experience with you? Right? Just a simple noi komo, an asking to enter, whether it's in Hawaiian or English, that's a Hawaii thing to do. We don't just walk into someone's house, right? We ask to be invited in. And so shifting in those small ways are actually very significant, because you're teaching them the values that are reflective of this place that they call home. Yeah. And then what is one thing that you would like to implement immediately in your practice, given hopefully a better understanding of what Nahopana'o looks like and some ways that you can shift to ground to Hawaii? What are some things that you immediately want to begin to develop and shift, even in this virtual realm? How are we creating opportunities for our participants, if you have any right now, to get back into their spaces, to get to know their homes a little bit better, to get to know their communities a little bit better, to uplift the Hawaii that they have to see every single day, right? Even if it's within the confinements of their own fences. How are we uplifting this notion that Hawaii, the sense of ohana, the sense of aloha, is really what's going to help us to continue to thrive? And beyond COVID, how do we remind ourselves that when COVID hit, community was what really stepped up to the plate, right? The sense of community for Hawaii is what really helped Ohana to continue to move forward. And so how do we continue to uplift that in the ways that we plan meaningful experiences for ourselves, for our staff, and for the participants that come in and out of our programs. So with that, I'd like to invite you folks to return to Mentimeter. You're going to go to, again, to www.mentimeter.com, and you're going to type in the code again, 1889215. And in one word, I'd like you to just type in, what is one word that describes how you feel about grounding? Oh, there's only supposed to be one "you're" there. E kalamai. Grounding your program to Hawaii now. Yeah. What is one word that describes how you feel about grounding your program to Hawaii now? Go ahead and take a moment to put your mana'o in the chat. And we only had a short time together today, and I was trying to jam in as much as possible for you folks. But know that we are open to take calls, to have talk story session with you folks to help you actually plan the content of what you're delivering. Whatever supports you need, we're here for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And my contact information will be at the end of these slides, which you folks will get from Jen. And any way that we can support your communities, please don't hesitate to let us know. With that, I'm going to allow you folks to continue to populate the Mentimeter. Like I said, you will be getting a copy of all of this to remind you of what's really meaningful for all of you. And I want to say mahalo nui a oko pakahiapo for having me here today. And I look forward to seeing what all of your wonderful programs engage in the coming year. Mahalo nui.
Thank you so much, Kaʻanohi. And I'd like to invite everyone on the Zoom to give Kaʻanohi a virtual round of applause or to share your thanks in the chat box. That was wonderful. I feel like I could just hear the passion in your voice, and I feel like I could just listen to you go on for hours. So thank you so much for that presentation. Paula, any last words before we go off?
No, I just would like also to thank you so much for your presentation. It's very inspiring, and I think it's helped us grounded us in Hawaii. Jen, are you going to put the evaluation link in the chat?
Yes, I just
okay.
popped the link to the evaluation. It's very short, but we'd love to get your feedback.
And please join us on Monday for the drama workshop. It was great last Tuesday, and I think you are going to enjoy it as well. Thank you, everybody, and have a great, great weekend.